Hi, I'm iKia, and for today's video, I want to give an in-depth guide into my newest addition to the guides folder, which is the timelines guide. And this timeline guide goes through the chronological history of the game as we go season by season, or well, even before season existed, TU by TU, and see what was added into each one. And this just as a visual guide to see when things were changed or moved around or when things were introduced. As for myself, everything of that has kind of morphed into one big blob. I do remember kind of when something kind of was added or the order of which, but exactly all of it, I don't really remember. And that was the impetus for this guide. I kind of needed something to make it for myself kind of clear. Okay, this was added here, this was added then, and this was changed here. And it did take quite a bit of time to get all of this data together. But in the end, it's worked out pretty well, I feel. Yeah, let's go start by introducing the guide, and then we'll also actually go through it a little bit and kind of have a little bit of a nostalgia hit as we go through. And let's start that by looking at the guides folder first, as I'll link to this one, of course, as well down below. In this folder, I have a bunch of guides, and I try to keep them up to date as well, as much as I can for the ones that need to, as changes happen. But there are a bunch of useful things in here, like the targeted loot guides for both the exotics and the names, in which we, for instance, show where to get the exotics and such, even though recently they cleaned up actually the exotics quite a bit and made it a lot easier to kind of show where everything is, as we have less items that are kind of special in some way. And those have been updated and will be done so regularly. But there's also, for instance, a damage calculation guide, a loot sources guide, a snitch guide, an in-game time guide, a specialization guide, skill guide, which still needs to be turned into a video, and yes, several others, as for instance, a macros guide and a countdown guide. And as well, now this timeline guide, which is this 98.0, as we're kind of counting down as well from 100, as the wrong text one was 99. So I put this one next to it as one that will be continuously updated as need be, as even the wrong text guide had a few additions to it recently. If we go into that file, we see this with all of these as well at the top, and this one will get that as well as soon as this video is basically out. We'll have a link to the video of the guide as most, with the exception of, well, this one, and then the skills guide as well, which still needs a video on it as well, although that's going to be a whole series of videos. That's why I've been kind of holding off on it just to find the time to do so. But yeah, this then lays out, well, it would have a link to there. Make sure as well there is a last updated here. That's on most of the guides, it's there. And if it is not been updated for a long while, if you're watching this in the far-flung future, yeah, that date is very important, of course. And then in this guide, we kind of lay out as well that, yeah, this guide goes over when everything was released. And one of the things I went out of my way to do here, because we could have just put the icons for everything here and the snippets from the expertise list into here. But one thing that I wanted was the ability to find in here. That's also why it lays out that you can press Control F and then search in here, as I've taken the time to write out everything in text form as well, just so it is searchable. So when we need to find exactly when something was added, we can do Control F and try to find it that way. And then it lays it out in this way, where we have every time there's a header, that's basically a new title update. And here we start at the base game, the release, and the release date up there. Then we have TU1, which was, for instance, already a day one patch. And then it goes basically with each edition here first with the title updates as they were at the start, even though now currently they still technically are title updates in the background. But it goes through all the way to when Woni releases, which of course changes the game quite a bit, and also then introduces seasons. And from there onward, we're doing TU and also seasons side by side. together with each of them as well. The date in there, the name of that patch, if it had one. And yeah, this way it makes it pretty easy to kind of go through this and really easily find when something happened, when something got added. Then also, as you see with each of these, in the bottom right corner, there's a little bit of text usually. And this is notable things that are beyond the gear and weapons and brands coming in and talents. And for instance here, the summit was added with this TU11 and season 3 all the way back then. For instance, well, season 4 introducing optimization. Then we, of course, had a bunch of repeats, so those are all up there. And together with that, then we go into when basically the resurgence of the game happened with Season 9 to 15, where we got Countdown, and then basically a re-establishing of seasons and new seasons coming out. And all the way through to current times, where we have here Year 7 Season 2 with the brands and the talents and the additions of this season coming in there. Overall, it's a pretty easy guide, of course. It's just a timeline guide, but one that is very useful, at least for myself as well, I find, as for a bunch of stuff, things were melted together, especially some of the changes and when some things were added. For instance, when were Seasons 2.0 introduced? And oh yeah, when was Project Resolve? Yeah, we can come in here and find that easily. And that was the core of this, of course. Yeah, let's actually go have a little bit of a nostalgia trip, as I do want to go through this and kind of, yeah, just ramble. We're just going to ramble our way through it. Discuss some of the things when stuff was added and when major changes happened. Kind of giving a little bit of the history of the game. And let's start here at the start. Where else? And this is the release and the release date of the game. Year 2019, month 03 and day 12. Now, as a pet peeve of mine, I'm just wanting to address it here. The way that video games work with their yearing system is at the end of year 7, for instance, as we are in now, then the game is 7 years old. The game currently is 6.5, a little bit over 6.5 years old. And yeah, that's also how that usually works, because here, starting out, we don't start with year 0, we start with year 1. Because of that, when we're in year 7, at the end of it is when we're supposed to be 7 years old, although the game's kind of out of alignment with its yearing system. But here, originally, all the way back then in March 2019, we got the initial release of the game. Here, to start off with, we have a bunch of the brands. Now, the brands, as we know them now, of course, there's a lot more of them, but those all got added in through time. This is the original set. Also, all of these, this all the way back here would be Gear 1.0 of the system. And they had much different bonuses, brand bonuses for a lot of them. I remember DNH being the crit set, for instance. I remember Providence being kind of like hybrid-ish, kind of like Hana U is nowadays. I don't remember much of the other ones. I do remember, for instance, yeah, Fenris did have AR, Petrov was LMG, Sokolov was always SMG, Araldi was always MMR, but they had all different bonuses to them. I was considering kind of actually even adding in, for instance, their old stats and such, but and I might still in the future just underneath here. But in the end as well, I kind of considered against that, also for instance, adding in the original set of talents and some of the talents that no longer exist, partially because it would just add a lot of bloat to this, and I kind of wanted to keep it a little bit more lean, also just to get it done, because that would add a lot of complexity here. But we see, yeah, a bunch of brands. All of the brands are still around. Same, for instance, actually for all of the named and exotics and stuff. Even when they get reworked, they usually don't remove anything. They'll just rework it, as it, for instance, went into Gear 2.0. Here already we do, for instance, have Ryal already being a DZ brand set, for instance. System corruption doesn't exist yet. That'll come in way later with Season 1. And yeah, all of these down here. And then also if we scroll down a little bit, we have here just 6 exotics starting out. One of them even being from the DZ, because the Ninja bikes originally were from the DZ. And then Acosta as just the singular gear that we had back then. And here I'm using Ruthless and Lullaby as the images, because in Expertise, I'm just using the images from Expertise, because everything is in there with one sole exception that we'll see later on, messing it all up, which is the turmoil. But for the Merciless and for the Sweet Dreams, actually, there's only Ruthless and Lullaby in that system. Even though that, yeah, they are basically linked to the same item, meaning that if you're using a Merciless, you're going to basically be proficiencying up both of these together. Then we also have the Chatterbox and the Liberty, which come through their own system of going around and finding them parts and then crafting them with their blueprints, one from Hyena boxes, the other from some of the True Sons bosses. And yeah, those were all the way back then in here. Also, we have a bunch of named items here that nowadays have, for instance, on Ferocious Calm, it's Perfect Overwatch. And that's also, I've set up this guide in the end here because I kind of want to be able to find them through their current one. But actually, I do want to go back at some point and spend the time in and get the old talents on there, which is, for instance, here, Perfect Berserk. As Ferocious Calm was very wanted item before it got into Gear 2.0, where it went to Perfect Overwatch, as Berserk left the game completely. But yeah, we're using, for instance, as well, for the Hollow Man, the current stats and such that it has. And I might actually go back and add in the historical ones at some point. But also for a lot of stuff, that's actually hard to find. This Perfect Berserk, yeah, perfectly easy to find. Finding some of the other ones has actually proven a little bit difficult. That's why I haven't done it here. But I might choose to do so in the future and spend the time to do that. But yeah, we have just 8 pieces of gear named, and then we have a ton of weapons that are named as well, of course. And we see as well that some stuff has been around for forever. For instance, even the shield splinter all the way back there, kind of also signifying that the hunters were always in the game. Pyromaniac there, we have a rail splitter, and some of the other things that we all know now. Although back then, yeah, the talent system, for instance, for weapons works quite different, where you had 3 talents for each weapon and such. And yeah, that got very much simplified with Gear 2.0. And also the original 3 specializations, Demolitionist, Survivalist, and Sharpshooter, and their accompanying skills here. Then also one that actually was like, wait, where is TU1? As I was trying to find that information. Turns out that TU1 was just a day 1 patch in the end. And yeah, it was just some minor stability fixes and some game balance changes. And yeah, TU1 actually hit directly with the release of the game, basically. Then we had go on to TU2, which is just a month later, which is pretty quick. This is also the first edition of the gear sets. We had no gear sets up there with release. It was only brand sets. This was the original release of the gear sets. Here, though, the gear sets were still 6 pieces, which very much limited them and made it so that they were just not competitive enough. And later changes would change that to 4 pieces that we have kind of nowadays, where the maximum bonus was on 4 pieces, so you could have 2 pieces of brands alongside of them, because they very much were not balanced with the idea of brands being around and brand sets adding a lot of bonuses from themselves as well. Then as well with this was the Battle for DC, as it was called, the patch. And this was the end of the invasion, basically, because before this, we didn't have Tidal Basin, and because of that, we also didn't have World Tier 5, which still to this day is kind of going to World Tier 5, even though World Tiers don't exist. The invasion, that is basically the same thing, exists in the background of it, and that is, yeah, that requires Tidal Basin to complete that, and then from that, you go to the final step of the invasion, or you complete the invasion, and then that's also, back in the day, that was World Tier 5. And this was then also, yeah, when Tidal Basin was added with that Adrestia, which was the starter piece for Nemesis, which to this day is still the starter piece for Nemesis, where you deconstruct it and get the scope. Nemesis coming in, Pestilence coming in, Pestilence being a DZ item back then as well. And you had to get one from the DZ first before it was added into your exotic pool, and later on you could share it with others. This was also the introduction of heroic difficulty for invaded missions. Back here, it was only invaded missions that had heroic difficulty. Everything else had only challenging as its maximum. Not even legendary existed back here. And this also then introduced a weekly invasion. Once you complete the title, you could talk to Manny and have a weekly invasion going. And for instance, actually a mechanical or a systems edition here, an FOV slider, which I feel has always been in the game. But yeah, it was close enough to release that it's kind of melted together with some of the other stuff. But that wasn't always in the game, apparently. Then we go to TU3, which was the addition of the Dark Hours raid. And the raid opened 2 days later after the patch. The patch was deployed, and then 2 days later, the raid opened. With that as well, we got the addition of Tip of the Spear, Negotiator, and Aces, which are still actually tied to Dark Hours as well, where you get the blueprints and such for them from there. And also, they require crafting material that comes from there as well. Then we have the Eagle Bearer coming in, of course, with the Dark Hours raid. This was also the first edition of some of the classified missions. So here we have Bond Armory, the starting one, of course, and the theater classified missions were added. This was also a major DZ rebalance that happened around this time. And keep in mind that some of these are actually part of, for instance, here we're just tossing them all together into TU3. But of course, TU3 was basically a TU 3.0, a 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, as we have still to this day. There's a point variant of these. So some of the things would happen not exactly here, but in this TU and later on seasons. And I'm still kind of bunching them together just for clarity's sake, because otherwise it would be a little bit too granular and would just add a lot of complexity here. And also for me to figure out exactly when those things happened, I feel this level of granularity is fine enough. Also, this is the addition of the post screen or the post mission screen, the end of mission results. That wasn't always in the game. That got added here with its own quirks and issues that we still kind of live with to this day, all the way back then. And this was also a talents and exotics rebalance happened in around this time. Then if we go to TU4, we get the Dodge City coming in with its own project and such, of course, that we have to go around and capture a bunch of control points and then go at high noon, meet someone in a shady place. This was also the introduction of the first extra specialization. The last three that we saw were just with the base game, of course, and then Gunner came in later. With the field research of those, also we always get some items. So here, for instance, we have the Menstaya and the Sleipnir coming in, and these were then additions here. Back then, actually, though, I believe, I don't remember exactly what the talents of them was, but yeah, we're again using basically their modern talents here. With the Gunner coming in as well, its specialization skill also here. This was also when the specialization ammo bar was added. Before this, actually, and I actually didn't believe this. I was like, wait, wasn't that always in the game? No, but this is early enough that yeah, it feels like it's always been in the game. But no, in the going back to beta footage and very early game footage, no, that bar is not there. So they added this in to make it easier to get specialization ammo. Before this, it was just random drops. Then we had also some gear mod changes, and also this was the occupied DZ being added in, which we still have to this day. Going on to TU5, which added in Camp White Oak and Zoo missions. That's also where it gets its name from, DC Outskirts. This was TU5, and yeah, we're now a few months after release, but just a little bit over 4 months. And this was also the introduction of the BTSU data gloves, which to this day as well is tied to Galveston as a specific drop, but also can just generally drop, of course. And with Diamondback coming in, the veterans will know that means that Kenley was added here. As originally Diamondback was from Kenley. It still can be gotten from Kenley, but most people just will get it randomly as a rifle, as it is in general targeted loot. But yeah, this was a bunch of missions getting added in this time, and for instance, we see Camp White Oak and Manning were added. Kenley as the expedition was added, even though Kenley got a few reworks. This was a very original version of it, which wasn't that great, especially not having difficulty selection back then was kind of an issue. This also added in 2 classified missions. Again, Aquarium and here NSA site classified missions were added in. Also, actually, one thing we don't see much of nowadays anymore, but back then was very common, was base weapons getting added in. So here we're getting the Carbine 7 and the Stoner as they were added into the game. And they came in with Camp White Oak and Manning because, yeah, they were also tied. And as still to this day, the first clear of Camp White Oak, the very first clear of Manning, will get you actually a Carbine 7 and a Stoner LMG, one of each from each mission. So also when the pistol flashlight was added in, and whenever you ended one of the heavies, one of the chainsaw heavies from the underground faction, you would get the blueprint for this. And this is when it was added in. Together with that, actually, account share blueprints coming in. That wasn't always in the game. That's also why it's an addition through iKia. And yeah, this really made it a lot easier to have multiple characters. Before this, if you wanted to have multiple characters, you would have to go and, for instance, yeah, the mods, the plus 20 round mods and such, you had to go get that on every character separately, and that was a mess. Now, of course, there were a lot less blueprints than we have nowadays, but still, it was a long grind. Also, here we have shepherding, ranks, and wings getting added to the game. Before this, the call for backup did exist, but it didn't have any rewards tied to it. And this was also when the commendations and such came in for it and the backpack trophy, because, yeah, before that, we didn't have wings. And, yeah, it was a good addition as well. This was also when skill cooldown. Veterans will remember that from all the way back in the day, where we had skill cooldown as a stat instead of skill haste as we have that now. And with skill cooldown, you could actually reduce the cooldown to very low amounts, and then rebalance that to skill haste, and that did make quite a difference because now we couldn't actually get skills out as fast as before, but it was also a little bit too fast before. This was also a major skill rebalance, and this was also one of the first steps actually towards, for instance, making Seekers kind of the meta as they were all the way to Woni. Going on to TU6, we have here Episode 2, Pentagon, The Last Call. Sawyers was added in. As a base weapon, here we had the KSG shotgun getting added in and getting already named off of it as well with the technician coming in. We also got the field research for that, and we got Motherly Love and the send-off there. Then also the artificer, of course, with technician coming in. And yeah, this was when Pentagon and DARPA were added in, and we could go do those. And also Camp White Oak and Manning Zoo got their invaded versions because, yeah, they were added in later. And there's even some old pictures floating around where there is very clear signs that they were planning to also do invaded versions of Pentagon and DARPA and Coney. But that, of course, never came to pass, kind of illustrating that sometimes some placeholder stuff gets put into the game, but in the end, it doesn't come to pass. And yeah, that's, for instance, one of those things. As in this research, I did run into old pictures from Out of Bounds, people getting out of bounds, and seeing very clear indications for mission starts for invaded versions of both Conies and the Pentagons and such. But yeah, that, of course, as we know now, never happened. This also introduced the Marine and the Embassy classified missions were added in. Together as well with targeted loot. Targeted loot wasn't always in the game. This got added here. Together with that, actually, brand pieces for every slot got added in. So before this patch, actually, not every brand had a piece for every slot, as we're so accustomed to nowadays, but certain pieces they just didn't exist. So, for instance, Araldi, I remember very specifically, didn't have a mask before this patch. And because of the way that Gear 1.0 worked and the less stats something had, the better those stats would be. Araldi was always a brand that had less stats than everything else, which took the whole thing onto itself. I remember very clearly going out and farming damage to elites, masks from Araldi with targeted loot after this patch and trying to, for instance, recalibrate that onto other pieces. But before that, for instance, Araldi did not have a mask, and several other brands, didn't have all of the slots. And we see remnants of that still to this day within the blueprint system, because a lot of pieces don't have blueprints for all of the slots that they have. But yeah, the addition of targeted loot coming in, and this was just the zone target loot. We don't have countdown yet. We don't have summit yet for specific or setting our target loot. This was just the zones, and each of the zones getting their own target loots with the missions and such as well. This was also the introduction of account share materials, as we have that here. Then also, this is the place where the gear sets go from 6 pieces as their max bonus. They're basically their full talent being on the 6-piece to being on the 4-piece, changing the way that the gear sets worked. And this was kind of the second piece needed for with the skill rework and such, where, for instance, the prevalence of hardwired came in with seeker spam and kind of becoming one of the metas. Back here, there were basically 4 kind of metas. One was Clutch Berserk. The other was Hardwire Seeker Spam, and then Aces as a support build along to all of those, as all the way back then, Aces was a support build, by the way. And then this was one of the major weapon rebalances here in TU6. We'll see another one actually with TU8, which is WONI release, TU10 actually, which is post-WONI, which are 2 big weapon rebalances before we get to the kind of more current ones. This was also when the stash space went from 150 to 300, which all the way back here. And of course, it would stay at 300 for a very long time until recently. Also, here is, for instance, one of those things that I totally did not remember, but was a thing, and people actually do remember it, and there's definite proof for it. And this is exactly why I wanted to make this kind of as well, to have stuff like this and run into stuff like this, which is critical strike range, which might be, for some people, might give them basically PTSD here as they kind of zone out and go like, oh yeah, that was the thing. For me, I basically totally did not remember this. But yeah, there was ranges tied to the critical chance, basically, and you had to be in those ranges, otherwise you wouldn't even be able to crit. And this was a system that was in the game all the way up to basically 7 months after release, and this is where it got removed. Also with TU 6.1, Hardcore came in. Also within, because this goes over until February, basically, this was a little bit of a bigger gap. Around the winter event of this and the holiday celebrations towards the end of the year was the introduction of the Slayer, which was the first of the joke items, basically, that the Hoarder will become to known for. And originally as well, it dropped from the Hoarder as well. So we farmed the Hoarder to get the Slayer all the way back here. There wasn't any event tied to it, or as a project range, basically, as we have nowadays, where we do several projects and we unlock an item and then it's in the Hoarder. But yeah, no, this one just, if you downed a Hoarder around the Christmas time there, you would get a Slayer drop. Although actually it was a percent chance. And yeah, moving on then to TU7, which was the last of the year 1 TUs, as we see Warlords of New York hiding up there. This was Coney, and this Coney was, of course, kind of as kind of story-wise a lead-in into Warlords of New York. We got the Chameleon there. We got 2 base weapons together with the Coney Island missions, and these were also then tied to them, and still to this day. On the first clear, you'll get a UIC and you'll get a G28 as they were added in. They also added in the Honey Badger. This was coming in for Savage Wolverine, which was from Firewall, of course, with the Firewall specialization coming in as well. That means also the Ammo Dump came in, and then also the Striker Shield came in. This was also the point where friend referral system was added in. Although actually, I need to add that down here. As the Stinger was, of course, from that system. So the Stinger coming in kind of signifies that. This was also when they added in the nightclub infiltration and the detention center rescue classified missions. These were also the last 2 classified missions getting added in. And this also introduced textiles. Before this, actually, opening up apparel caches would also give you XP. That would actually get used sometimes to level up alts. I remember actually leveling up an alt a certain amount of way with just opening apparel caches for them. This removed that, but then added in the textile system that we know nowadays. Let's move on to year 2. And with year 2, it starts with Warlords of New York. Kind of went a little bit silent before that, all the way back then. And then suddenly they came out and went, hey, we have this thing. You guys might like it. We're going back to New York. Pack your bags, let's go. And it was actually pretty cool the way that they did it back then. It was kind of, we didn't know until a month or a month and a half, a bit, I feel, before it was released. And it was released in March as well. And that as was also, for instance, Division 1 was released in March. Division 2 was released in March. And this one was also released in March. It did break that tradition with Battle for Brooklyn, which I was kind of sad about. This was then TU8, but then this was also, later on, this will turn into Season 1, because we have two things going on here. First, we have Warlords of New York releasing, but then also we have Season 1 and its reward track and such. But with Warlords, we got some of the brands we know and love today in Cheska, in Grupo, in Hanayu, and in Golan. Much used gears or brand sets, especially Cheska and Grupo, of course. And yeah, several items coming in. For instance, yeah, the Bullet King, the Imperial Dynasty, the Lady Death, and then also Bighorn. And this was also, with the Bighorn coming in, the introduction of Legendary, as we'll see in a second in that list. A bunch of named weapons, or named weapons and gear, of course. Well, first the 4 from that we would get from the bosses consistently as the first clear on each of the Warlords of New York bosses will get you one of these items as we see them here. And several other items as well, of course, coming in. A bunch of named items. But we'll see in a second, actually, with Season 1, with the track, especially that we got a lot more. This was also then the big change, and we're kind of doing it a disservice by just going Gear 2.0. But Gear 2.0 was a major rebalance and a major rework of how all the gear worked. This could be a video onto itself, and I'll likely leave it to that, as yeah, Gear 1.0 was completely different of a system and ideology behind it. Gear 2.0 came in with just having 2 stats per gear instead of just each brand having several different ways that it would roll stats and have different amount of mod slots and such. No, it very much simplified it. I made it so as well that it was much easier, for instance, to copy a build and then kind of get it to a good place. Although back here, we still don't have optimization. The game did release with recalibration, but we don't have optimization yet. We'll get that later. This was also, for instance, where Enforcer came in as a pre-order bonus for if you pre-ordered Woni, you would get it for there. With the bosses of Woni, whenever you finished one of their missions, you would get, of course, one of their skills. That was the introduction of these 4 new skills as well. And yeah, this was a very big, complete gear brand and talent change. And yeah, it was actually a major upheaval. Kind of masked as well, as we went here from going from level 30 and being World Tier 5 at level 30 and having gear score, for instance, to going to level 40 and also dropping gear score fully. And this was also a complete skill rework and a mod rework, as all of those things got changed very heavily. Woni was definitely one of the turning points of the game, and one that I feel is for the better. I'm very much in favor of Gear 2.0 and the somewhat simplification that it did, but also the uniformity of it. That was more a thing for me. Before this, you would actually have to remember, like, oh, if I get a DNH backpack, it might have 2 stats, major stats, 2 minor stats, and a mod slot. But oh, if I go with a Gila backpack, it'll have 1 major stat, 3 minor stats, and 1 mod slot. And then even within mod slots, gear or protocol. It was very messy. And while someone like me, with my kind of playtime, I would have gotten by, I feel a lot of other people would not. Then also together with that, so we have here the 3rd or the 2nd of the 3rd month, so the 2nd of March, Warlords releases. Several weeks or a month and a bit later is when Season 1.0 fully releases alongside of it. Before that, we had Woni, and then here Season 1 started. And Season 1 was actually as well very much tied to kind of, yeah, if you bought Woni, you would also get Season 1. And back here as well, unless you were level 40, you wouldn't get access to these seasons, basically, if you didn't own Woni. Now, of course, it's very different, where you can actually level all the way to 40 without even owning Woni or Brooklyn. And yeah, this was then TU9, back then Season 1, the introduction of seasons. And then, of course, from here on out, we'll have the season system kind of being there. This was Shadow Tide. This was the introduction of Striker all the way back then. But Striker wasn't what it is nowadays, basically. It wasn't actually that effective back with original release. It was definitely usable, but high-ends were still king. And this was also the introduction of system corruption. And system corruption, of course, to this day, still a DZ gear set, and this was added in here. Then there was a ton of named items that actually came from here. Part of these as well, in my head, were always there. But yeah, Woni is so far back nowadays as well that yeah, it very much felt like that. We have one exotic coming in, the Coyote here. But then, yeah, a ton of named item. I was going back and looking actually at the reward track from those seasons, from screenshots, and actually several videos from back then. As one of the sources I used a lot for this is going back and actually watching videos of people going through, you know, basically the videos of like, hey, the new season is here. This is the reward track as they go one by one. Actually, it turns out for historical purposes, even though nowadays I feel I would never, for instance, for myself, make those kind of videos because I feel like I'll just go into the game and look at it. But actually for historical purposes, worked out really well. As yeah, I could just parse through those and yeah, figure out all of these items and when they were added in. And back here as well, we are still getting DZ items, for instance, in the reward tracks coming in with Dark Winters, with Manix, and for instance, yeah, the gift coming in here as well. And with that, with season 1, from season 1 to 4, we also, with each of the climax missions, we would get a skill. So here we're getting the MP Sticky from Jupiter. And this was also a major NPC rebalance, as actually when Woni released, it was a little bit overtuned. There was a lot of elites, especially in Heroic. As also with Gear 2.0, or with Woni release, we got Legendary added in. We had Heroic for all missions getting added in, as I actually should go and add up there. And here we have done, yeah, a rebalance to make that a lot more doable, because the heroics early on, especially before optimization, you have to think back, this is before optimization, this is before Striker is what it is nowadays, this is before expertise. We had, yeah, we would struggle on heroic, actually, even good players. Heroic was basically as hard as a legendary. But it was also a little bit down to how they had how they had stacked up a lot of elites in there. And we then back here as well have actually PFE as a build style, and we'll see actually the change that made that possible a little bit later on. This was also when assault rifles got a pretty big rebalance to them, going to 21 DTH, making assault rifles actually going from rifles and LMGs being kind of the meta, going to that. Also, this is when Contractors and Frux got a rework, as they did release with Gear 2.0 being what they were, but then they were pretty high in their DTA and their DTOC, and they got lowered down a little bit. Then we go into Season 2, 3 months later, effectively after the release of Woni. And here we get Walker and Harris and Eclipse coming in, and here we also start getting some of the talents showing up. Now, before this as well, of course, all of the talents, for instance, in the base game and such, there was a ton of talents and such. But here I'm just adding in the ones that they're adding in, because in this Gear 2.0 rework, basically, almost all of the talents got touched in some way. Almost no talent came in directly through. But to list them all would be, yeah, would add a lot of bloat. But I'm considering actually doing that and just going in and kind of showing the changes as well. But for the time being, we're basically showing them with their final, what they have nowadays still. But here is the introduction of Headhunter coming in, and then also Adrenaline Rush and Future Perfect, as we would usually get 2 talents, 1 chest talent, 1 backpack talent for gear, and then usually as well 1 or 2 weapon talents alongside of them. There's also the introduction of the Val and the Mantis. This season was very much into headhunting, and then also Eclipse, of course, coming in, being a status effect setup. This also introduced the SIG and the Resolute Mark 47 as weapon types. And of course, they also instantly got some of their names with them. This was kind of how it used to work for the first few seasons. And we also get the repair skill, as we are going into with Season 2's climax mission. We go after Hornet, and we get his we get the repair skill to get to him. This was also a general difficulty rework. This is also where the booster hive got reworked, specifically for going from zooming around and adding movement speed to not having that. And this is also, yeah, where caches got a bunch of improvements. So for instance, before this, actually proficiency caches and especially as well, clan caches really rolled pretty poorly. Nowadays, and well, after this change, proficiency caches basically roll heroic level gear, and clan caches actually roll legendary level gear, making it a lot more so that you might get something useful out of them. As before that, they would actually roll pretty bad gear. Also, yeah, this introduced a few directives into the mix, as with actually going into Season 1, we got a few directives, but then this introduced Hard to Earn and Pistolero into the mix. This was also when incoming repairs got a rework. Before this, it would actually apply to things like talents and such, and that was pretty overpowered, especially with some talents, for instance, providing some regen and such, and this incoming repair would actually interact with that. And then this is how incoming repair is now still, where it should only apply to skills and healing from skills. This also introduced the SHD requisition. Going to Gear 2.0, of course, we also went into having the watch and the watch points associated with that, or the watch level associated with that. This introduced the SHD requisition to get a free exotic basically every week per character. This also then introduced the legendary projects that we still have to this day. And this was also when the weapon handling stat was reworked, because before this, it was actually a quarter. So it was, I don't even remember how it exactly was, but it was, each point was basically a quarter into accuracy, a quarter into stability and such. And I think it was only at full strength on swap speed, I think. But yeah, it was a messy thing. Now, of course, 1 point in weapon handling is 1 point in basically accuracy, stability, weapon swap speed, and reload speed. So that rework was well needed and well deserved for that stat, making it much more useful. Together with that as well, actually, this is also because that rework kind of went hand in hand with Headhunter as well, helping out, making headshot handling kind of the stats we still go for to this day. Then also on a few weeks later on that one, or before actually, before the season started, we also got the Iron Horse raid coming into the game, which was the second, and then to this day, basically the last raid we got. This introduced Future Initiative and Foundry Bulwark, of course, and then the Ravenous and the Regulus through there as well. And yeah, Iron Horse was a big event, I remember, back in the day. I didn't try it until months and months later, until it kind of got figured out, basically. Then we go into TU11 Season 3. This was then a Concealed Agenda, where we get as well the Shrapnel Trap coming in. I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, this is of course Schaefer's season. We got Bellstone, we got Hunter's Fury coming in, Memento, one of the staples to this day, Backfire, an often used item. We also got the Ridgeway, which was of course from the Summit game mode, and the Summit coming in as well here in Season 3. And Summit was, of course, yeah, to this day, still a pretty good addition to the game. I very much enjoy running around in the Summit. This was also when, as base weapons, Card 45 and the 612 came in, and then together with that, of course, their named counterparts. From here already, they did have these stats, as you had the TDI card always, or the custom always came in with +1 skill tier already from its start. As basically, once we've gone past Gear 2.0, the names and such will have the talents as they are to this day. With that as well, we got Everyday Carrier with Perfectly Efficient, and then also Liquid Engineer with Perfect Bloodsucker. Those talents weren't new things to us. We already had those, but this added in the perfect versions of them. And as well, the Shrapnel Trap from Schaefer's mission coming in. Also, this was when the Rainbow Loot fix happened, where especially one of the stats would roll to be much more in line with the first stat of, or the core stat of the piece. This to this day, well, it helps a little bit if you're looking for items with the same minor colors as the core. But when you're looking for, and especially, of course, this is the unicorns issue, this really did exasperate the searching for unicorns, because if the core is blue and we want red stats, we'll actually see less of those, because at least one of the stats is much more likely to be the same color as the core. So for instance, with Habsburg, which is a blue core, most of the time, more than half the core, or because the core is blue, one of the minor stats will be blue as well. Which, of course, if we're looking for headshot weapon handling together with Headhunter, for instance, or Vigilance, this actually kind of gets in the way, actually. So yeah, this still to this day, I wouldn't say they should revert it as well, because it was actually somewhat annoying that if you're looking, for instance, for Grupo and you just want crit chance crit damage, or Cheska and you just want crit chance crit damage, they would then be less likely. So this is, yeah, it hurts in one way, but it helped in another. So this also introduced the scavenge skills as and fragile armor as directives, as added directives into the mix. And also this was the removal of the colored mod slots. So before this, every piece of gear with Gear 2.0 as it came in, if you, for instance, got a Grupo backpack, it would always have a yellow mod slot. You couldn't put a red mod in there. That's actually also one of the reasons, for instance, why originally the Providence setup, the 3-piece Providence setup, was so so widespread, was that Providence came with red miners, as for instance, in Cheska, or a red mod slot. Cheska came in with a blue mod slot, for instance. This removed that, and this was also the original point where it became possible to do protection from elite builds the way that we do them now, because even before that, improvised gear also had fixed colors to each of these pieces. So if I remember right, for instance, gloves was yellow, I think, and holster was blue, knee pad was red. So yeah, you couldn't have, the 3 PFE that we kind of put in improvised pieces there. And this removed that, simplified that system even further to kind of what we know today. And this was also the original introduction of the gear transmog, the visual system that we have now, where we can make certain pieces of gear look like other pieces. This was the very first version of that coming in. Going on to Season 4, which was the last of the Year 1 seasons, we get Empress, we get Rigger, we get the base weapons of PDR and the Tactical 308 and their named counterparts, of course. This was also when, because while Summit was introduced and Ridgeway was there, Capacitor wasn't actually in the game yet and wasn't tied to Summit. It comes in here. And then together with that, we get Waveform and Scorpio. This season being very much in line with some of the skill builds and such. Then we got some names here. We already had skilled and calculated as talents, so they don't show up here. Same as well, actually, we already had, as we saw in Season 1, the addition of Future Perfect and In Sync as normal talents, but we did have the perfect versions already in some weapons, but then we got the more, the ones, or well, somewhat in the test subject one that we use a lot more than, for instance, the Harmony. With this as well, the Fei Lao season, and this was also then where with the Fei Lao Climax mission, we got the Achilles Pulse. And here as well, this introduced optimization. This was the first season where we got to have optimization and we could take gear and put resources into it and make it a little bit better. Before this, you got what you got. So guard rolls were much more worthwhile. And some of these guard rolls that I got before optimization existed, I still have to this day as several weapons that I had, and even some gear that I have from all the way back then. That was guard roll. I still have to this day, just as nostalgia a little bit. And then this was also when inventory on character went from 100 to 150, because while we did get a stash increase a lot earlier, even in Year 1, this was when they changed the inventory on the characters, and also the second time they changed loadout. I couldn't actually find exactly when the first time was, but this was the second time they increased the loadouts, and it went from 12 to 16. This was also when the global event shop was introduced. Before this, actually doing the challenges, you wouldn't get a star per every level. You would just have the challenges. If you completed all of the challenges, or well, a lot of them, you would just unlock the reward track, and that was the only reward from global events. And the introduction here was of the global events shop, where you would, beyond that, also get a star per level, and then you could spend those on the global events shop that, you know, nowadays we know and love. Also, this was picking up deployed skills getting added. So picking up the hive, picking up the turret and such. Still to this day, of course, not all deployed skills, but yeah, at least being able to pick up, for instance, the hive is a great addition, and this was where it was introduced. And this also introduced the Ragers directive on top of the other directives that we already had. Then we get the Year of Sadness, where we basically have a rerun year. So starting in 2021, all the way here to basically 2022, and then May, we basically have reruns. And this is when behind the scenes, basically the development of the game was kind of stunted and just laid to rest. They were actually planning on kind of just not continuing on. But they did reruns here, and then eventually they, behind the scenes, did get some support or get enough support going to actually continue developing for the game. But here we basically didn't know really what was going to happen, as we basically just got a rerun, and this was first of season 1, and then 3 and 4. And then 2 later. This was also done this way because actually halfway through they kind of announced that they were going to do something in the future, but development basically had moved to other things, which we know now to be, for instance, the movie tie-in for Avatar, that video game, and then also later on Star Wars Outlaws. But here we are, yeah, season 5, 6, and 7, and 8 were all reruns of previous seasons. So yeah, we basically get the same. Although one new thing that we did get, a minor one, was basically, for Christmas as a little gift, we did get the Chill Out, and this was added in with the winter event there. Also, this was the first Striker rework, where it got reworked to no longer need stacks, which was one of the major additions to it, of course, before it got its second rework, where it also got much bigger bonuses, and the chest also increased the stacks. But this was the original Striker rework for where it no longer actually on misses would, and this already made Strikers kind of useful, but not as OP as it is nowadays. Then moving on, we basically go from, we had year 1 and year 2, and then a little bit into year 3, we start getting some new stuff again. As this was the promised return of seasons and new things. As in May, in the end, as they originally targeted March. But in May, they started with, 2.15 and then season 9. And this was when, Countdown came in. And Countdown, of course, to this day as well, still one of the places we go to a lot. And it will, from here on out as well, have kind of the same cadence for all of them. And this is where they kind of settled on this, where they basically introduce a piece of gear, a weapon from the season, basically a brand set and a gear set, usually a talent to go with them, and then some of the names to carry that talent as the perfect version, and quite often an extra exotic. Now, we know that from nowadays as well, again, from the Climax mission, but actually that's nothing new, because, for instance, here we have the blue screen coming from the Climax mission here, and we would get the Catharsis and the Dread Edict from the season track, but then the blue screen was tied all the way to the end of the season, where we had to do the Climax mission, and then we would get it for the first clear there. So actually all the way back here, they already kind of had that system. But in between, they kind of dropped that system for a while. This was also the last time we saw a base weapon coming in. And also what we'll see is that there won't be that much in the side pieces here, as it's a little bit more recent, but also, less happens nowadays, or ever since this, than we used to have before. They would add a lot more per season, basically. And it is still kind of sad to see, but of course, later on, yeah, we will get things like Battle for Brooklyn and such that will make up a little bit for it. Yeah, this introduced Countdown, and of course, the Countdown system. Already Summit, when it came in, it already had that targeted loot system that we know and love for it. Countdown kind of carried it over to it, of course. And yeah, Countdown here, though, would just be basically what we know now as challenging Countdown. It didn't have difficulty modes yet. That's also why, for instance, a lot of the things for it are, well, at the very least, one thing for it is a little bit wrong still, where one of the loading tooltips is that all loot is heroic quality. That's just for the initial release, which was basically what is now challenging Countdown. They added, of course, the difficulty system to it. We have now heroics, but we also have normal and hard, which definitely don't drop heroic level loot. So that can be the way to, for instance, as well. Go past that. This also introduced expertise as a system. And of course, with it, expertise, the cap of it being at 20 at the very start. Nowadays, of course, it's capped at 30, but as we see, as we go through the seasons, we're about to see 10 seasons of growth in expertise come by. And yeah, Countdown very much was well received. Heartbreaker coming in was very overpowered. This was the original broken Heartbreaker that you may have heard about, where each stack of it was self-multiplicative, meaning that at 100 stacks, it would have a 170 plus-ish, around that number. It was basically 100 stacks of 1.01 multiplier, just all multiplying against each other, not adding together. And yeah, it was very much OP. A lot of people didn't notice because a lot of people were going for expertise, including me. But it was very noticeable that, yeah, Heartbreaker was very OP, but everybody was kind of just running a lot of different builds just to proficiency them. Kind of, you know, everybody was on that train at that time. So it kind of flew a little bit under the radar, but yeah, it was very much needed that it got a change. Then going on to Season 10, and back here was just still Season 10. We didn't have years added to it yet. And this was the introduction of Brazos, of Umbra, Sledgehammer as a talent, and then, of course, some weapons to carry that. Also, with the winter event of it, we got O'Carroll, another joke item, basically, and yeah, this slotted in quite nice next to the Slayer, of course. This was also the season Bloody Knuckles and Busy Little Bee were introduced on the season track, and then for the climax mission, which was the Anderson mission, we got Dr. Home. So we had to wait for that one as well back then. Then we got also two pieces of gear, and then here, usually with the gear, they haven't done many new gear talents nowadays. So yeah, they're just doing our perfect ones here. So perfect overclock, and then here a perfect stat coming in. This was also, of course, expertise 21 as we go up in the season. Each season basically added one expertise worth of it, up until Battle for Brooklyn, which added 2 because basically 1 was for Brooklyn's things. This was also when they started doing the winter holiday event as a project list. Basically, before this, for instance, with the Slayer, with the Chill Out, you would just end the Hoarder, and then he would drop randomly something, hopefully, and you would just farm him for it. But with O'Carroll was when the projects were introduced. This was also when Countdown difficulties was added in. And then also Tidal and Zoo got their legendaries here. As before that, it was just the 3 main strongholds, which was Roosevelt, Capital, and DUA, which had legendaries. And those were introduced all the way back in Season 1, or well, Warlords of New York release. And then going on to Season 11 here, Reign of Fire. This is where we get Habsburg and Hotshot, staples to this day. And of course, Determined, as well, a staple, but then also a staple of discussion as well. And this is also where we start seeing, actually, they're moving away from having an item tied to the climax mission. We do get, the Determines, of course, going again on some items. We do get some reworks, or well, some reuses of normal talents being turned into perfect versions. And we see that for the Habsburg here. Also, the introduction of the Ninja Bike and the Sacrum. Expertise is going to 22, and as well, the raid and legendary exotics were added to the DZ loot pools here, so that you could go and in the DZ encounter things like the Bighorn and and the Eagle Bearer and the Ravenous and such are there, and later on as well the Ouroboros. Moving on to here to 18 year 5 season 1. This is where the year 5 the yearing started. We went from season 11 to basically what was season 12, and in my mind this is still season 12 to me, but this is year 5 season 1 officially to 18. They were still using TUs, and especially for the patches and stuff using that. Nowadays of course they use basically the next patch we're going to get in likely a few days is going to be year 7 season 2.1 or 0.2 actually in this case, or is it 0.1? No, it's 0.2 I think. But yeah, they're doing it like that now, so they've moved away from the title updates. We are in June of 23, and yeah, we're getting Electric, Cavalier, Thunderstrike coming in as the talent, and of course its named variants, Shocker Punch and Elmo coming into the game. Actually, in my head, Elmo was before Ninja Bike, but yeah, it turns out it wasn't. But yeah, as I said, it's melted together a lot. This is also where we get a decent look at Descent, and Descent comes in as its own game mode. And to this day, of course, yeah, I kind of do like doing my descents into madness. We do also, expertise goes up by 1. This is also when the activities XPs was revamped, and this was also when, yeah, the convoys, as before this, farming convoys on 5 directives in the open world was the farming thing to do. This moved it to become the public executions that we know nowadays, and go after the propagandas, the public executions, and hostage rescues. This was when that revamp happened. Before that as well, actually, to be clear, the thing that was broken about convoys was they were giving double XP, basically. It was the stated XP was coming in twice, which, was kind of course, breaking the system unintentionally. And then also this was when the quick grenade menu came on. One thing that, nowadays as well, I kind of go like, oh yeah, was that always there? That was always there, right? We press and hold G and we can select our grenade. No, of course that wasn't there always. And that was when this was added in. Going on to year 5, season 2, 19, we got Stabilize, we got Ortiz and Lengmo coming in. Lengmo, of course, still a little bit of a staple nowadays. We get the perfect stabilizers that nobody ever really uses. We have a winter event here again, and yeah, we get the festive delivery, which when it first came in, it broke PvP for quite a bit, because yeah, it was a little, you could grenade yourself and it would do its effect, and it would also do its effect at full damage. And that was broken for quite a little bit. They did actually fix it decently quickly, but yeah, there was a lot of shenaniganery back then. Then also actually with this patch, as we'll see in a second, the incursion came in. But yeah, we got the collector, we got the iron lung here, and yeah, the Lengmo named pieces. Also with this, yeah, expertise went up again. The tips reworked actually happened all the way back here. In my head, it kind of was around Project Resolve, but actually, I know it happened way earlier than that. This was also again another winter project coming in as a project list. And this was also when the Descent rewards were buffed quite heavily, so that we got more reconstructed caches and such through it. This also was then the patch where it introduced the first and only incursion we have so far, and hopefully in the future maybe we'll get some more. But yeah, Paradise Lost came in, and with that, the one item from it, which is the Ouroboros by itself. But of course, yeah, the fights to be had there are, to this day, still some that we do quite consistently. Then we go to year 5, season 3, and they were doing, at this point, once they went also into year 5, they were doing 3 seasons per year of basically each of them being 4 months, 12 weeks, which is still a little bit odd to do seasons in that way, but it works. It works well enough. That was also always there to give them a little bit more time to develop each of the seasons and work on, for instance, things like the incursion, and then later on even on Battle for Brooklyn. But yeah, we're getting close to being actually, because this released, of course, March would be really the time for a new year to start, because that was the release of it. But as we see later on as well, yeah, they won't hit that. And this is already where we're kind of going to go off the rails, where the year really doesn't line up with when the anniversary really is. But yeah, this one came out in February with a year 5, and I feel actually they should have gone to year 6 here just right away. We get Palisade, we get Aegis, we get Behind You, associated weapons and gear, and then as well, Rugged Gauntlets and Mosquito coming in from the season track. Then the Vindicator, of course, is as a descent item, so you have to farm descent for an NSA tech, and then you can buy it for the currency from the vendor. This was a later addition to the game, and then basically added as a reward to descent. Expertise going up to 25. This was also when Project Resolve hit, and Project Resolve was a very big rebalance of the game, which should help out in the end. There's still people that kind of make fun of it and such, but no, it was very much needed. It did fix a lot as well. A lot of issues that persisted before this. Everybody forgets that they got solved back here with a lot of the crashes and such, for instance, that was very prevalent before this. While we still have some crashes and some Delta issues here and there, and especially, for instance, Countdown is famous for, it's still persistent crash that can happen with when the extraction is close to the box. But yeah, Project Resolve did actually improve things a lot for the better. This was also when the Descent talent pools were introduced, also a subject of much debate. In my opinion, once they added in the amount of talents, because Descent as well, season upon season, was getting talents added to it. Once they reached basically a critical mass that they did, they kind of needed to do something like this, because otherwise it would have been, and it would to this day as well be, if you remove the rotations out of it, it would be hell to do a Nemesis run. It would be much easier to do a deep run, but also way too easy because it would break balance going up in there. Imagine just having Envy and then having, for instance, within Envy, having Intimidate on top of there, or having, for instance, having InSync as an extra yellow to go along with the rest, or Opportunistic. Yeah, that would be quite game breaking. It could be fixed with a rebalance and such, but the talent pools were actually a pretty understandable and clean fix to it. This is also when the tinkering menu was added in as that was a really good addition, especially as well being able to just donate from anywhere, but also just to tinker and recalibrate things just out in the field, which I still to this day do quite a lot, just moving talents around, messing around with talents on weapons and on gear just in the field without having to go back to a crafting or recalibration station. This is also the instant use armor kits coming in, the double tap, and that giving us a quick heal, which actually nowadays is very much a thing of, you can very much see someone which is a little bit more experienced, and when they get set on fire, that they'll know, for instance, that if they use that instant use, they might survive it, especially if they're close to health gate, but if they don't, you will likely die. And that is still a very useful thing to do there. This was also the status effect diminishing returns in PvP. And then in brackets NPV. This, of course, was just intended for PvP, but then, seeped through into PvE unintentionally. And to this day, I hope they address it at some point, even though we're kind of used to it at this point in the PvE end of things as well. And then we go into year 6. And year 6, season 1, here starting a few months late, basically. And we still have that issue kind of going on to this day, where if you really wanted to have year 6, you kind of start closer to March, which, for instance, the last season before this was closer to it than this one is. This was the introduction of Zvia and Breaking Point, I feel as well, a lot more closer to, what is in my recent memory, I feel, as back here I was already up there and making videos, so I kind of remember these a lot better. With Brazen coming in as a talent, their named pieces, Cooler coming in as an summer event here, which was the introduction of summer events. Before this, we had just joke items basically on winter events or special items like that. This was the introduction of a summer event to go with that, and also more times that the Hoarder would be up. Because actually before this, the Hoarder would only be up, or in its special form. Of course, the Hoarder is always around, but his special edition, where he drops the special items, was only around in the winter. And that kind of sucked, because, for instance, chill out was actually kind of useful in some places. So they started adding in events to kind of mitigate that and have him be up more often, and then also adding in events items for that as well. And cooler, still pretty cool, of course. This was also Acosta and Overlords coming in, which both don't see much use. Zuya, though, yeah, staple. I feel Brazen a staple. And yeah, 2 named items for this. The Eagle I do use from time to time. Expertise going up 1, level 40 for all. And this is level 40 becoming available for everybody, even if they don't own Woni. Before that, the only way to 40 was true Woni. This also changed how watch alts would work. And yeah, that was pretty big change, actually, to how we did watch alting. A thing we don't do anymore, but back then was pretty prevalent. This was also then, with going to level 40, the world tiers were removed, and even though behind the scenes they kind of still exist as invasion, and then instead of advancing world tier, it pops up advancing invasion. And yeah, the aforementioned summer event coming in as one of the first basically extra events. And nowadays, of course, we have through the year, we have several events that will make it so that the special hoarder is around. Going on to year 6, season 2, we get Legatus and Virtuoso together with Precision Strike. They're named items. We get Centurion, Strega coming in. And then this was the reintroduction of both Climax missions, and then together with that as well, the Master difficulty for them. So Provocator was the first one for the Parnell mission. And with that, if you completed the Climax mission on the first clear of Master, you would guaranteed get this item. And that's kind of how it works from here on out, of course. And we see that for the, 3 seasons here in a row, and we'll see that again for the Tempest for this season. And then the Tempest is also available from other places. This was also the first time we saw the Lexington, as it came in as the veteran reward. It came kind of around Christmassy time, as this one, of course, is kind of gapping that time frame there. We also got the Snow Machine. This was then for the winter and the holiday/holiday event, basically. And the Snow Machine came in as a joke item, basically. And because this one also gapped over this season, late into this season, we also got the First Sight, which was the, of course, love at first sight of for the Valentine's event. This was then also, expertise went up. Point blank modifier was for that season, and this was also the very first season, of course, that we got modifiers and such. And this was the very first one in Point Blank, where we had, the ranges and such to go with it. And of course, very much dominated by Bite the Teeth that season, and it was very much about that. This was also Seasons 2.0. Before this, we had the manhunts going through, basically clearing out the zones and such as we had it, and then doing some bounties and such. This was Seasons 2.0 coming in with the current scout system that we have. We did have a winter event that got us the Snow Machine. Also, this is when rifles became fully automatic in this season. And also, this was the 222 weapon reloads rebalance. And this was one of the last rebalances that we kind of got for weapons, as actually on 220, we had also a pretty big rebalance happening to some of the weapons through Project Resolve. So Project Resolve did a major part of it, and then, they kind of went a little bit further here with the 222 ones. Then we go into 223, or at this point they're basically just using year 3 or year 6, season 3. They're using the year system. We get shiny, we get refactor, and we get pressure points coming in. They're named items and such. Exodus gloves coming in, Oxpecker. And then for the climax mission, here we get Birdie's quick fix pack. And this was, of course, then from here on out, the master mission kind of became a way of introducing an item late into the season, which I actually still kind of like. Having one item kind of go to the end of the season to have something to look forward to towards there. Then we also see the one item that breaks convention here, where for every other item I'm using the expertise thing. Thermal came in, and with the April Fools as an April Fool's item, and April Fool's event item. as it's very much not a joke item, actually. But yeah, it breaks convention because it doesn't have one of those, as it's not in, as it isn't in expertise, as it also has no proficiency there. But yeah, so the one item breaking convention here, that came with the April Fool event, which was a month and a bit later after the introduction of the season. Also within the season, we got the hand basket coming in as well. Of course, one weapon that that I definitely enjoy a lot since its introduction. This was the Rogue Momentum modifier season. This also introduced the stretch goals, the very first incarnation of them, which had a lot of issues, especially with people cheating it effectively. And this is also, when we get the more recent stash increases, where it takes the stash increase if you own Year 1 and WONI. For each of those, you get plus 50 to the stash. Later on as well, we would get for Battle for Brooklyn. We did get the April Fool's event, and actually, I didn't include the April Fool event items here because I felt it would be a little bit too much filler. But yeah, we got 10 exotics from that were very similar, but weren't real exotics. And yeah, we got the Memento and such, and the regular and such. And yeah, that was the April Fool's event of getting effectively a bunch of extra exotic components, but through some basically hilarity, as would catch some people out. And yeah, this also introduced the spring and the Easter event for the first time, which we'll likely see repeated over and over again. Moving on to Year 7 now, and Year 7 is of course current year. Year 7 started in May, and yeah, it would have been nice if they could kind of line it up so that maybe pull out a week out of each of the coming ones and kind of line it up with March again. But here we're getting Imminence Armaments and Measured Assembly Streamline as a talent coming in. And yeah, their associated items, expertise going up by 1. This was the hard-core modifier, not to be confused with hardcore, the game mode. And this was also when the SHD watch points were reworked, where before this, we could have things like watch alts, if you're familiar with that, watch mules, as some of them call them. And there you could have, it was that the watch points were character specific. So if you spent them on one character, deleted that character, made a new one, got them to 40, it would again be at the full watch points. Now it's account wide, of course. And that introduction was kind of needed, as also what we're getting here together with it is Battle for Brooklyn coming in, of course. And Battle for Brooklyn had a level 40 boost, and that would have completely broken resources otherwise. We also see some summer event and a payday event coming up. Here, though, actually, with the start of that season, we got a Game Pass event, which was for shepherding. And with that, we could get the Caretaker. And with the summer event, we got the Slingshot there. Exotics-wise, we got the Nimble and the Pahan. And then for the Climax mission, and this one was the one where actually I kind of enjoyed that it was, even though it was a wait to get to it and get to the Tinkerer, I kind of enjoyed having something for later in the season, where we did get the Tinker a little bit later, and of course, Tinker becoming a very interesting item, one that we're still discussing up to this day quite often, and comes up in a lot of build conversations. With that as well, though, that was also the release with Year 7 was the release of Battle for Brooklyn, which we're splitting off here just for its items separately here. Now, of course, we also get the boost to level 40 with Battle for Brooklyn, and then also if we own Battle for Brooklyn, we get a stash increase of 50. 2 skills are tied to Brooklyn, and that's also why I'm kind of spreading it out like this. These are the items that you do need to own Battle for Brooklyn for to own. We get the Precision and the Fortified Smart cover from doing the story, basically, out there in Brooklyn. The Huntsman comes from the Hunters, as we get Ash Keys, and then we can open that up. That Huntsman was actually very interesting as we got it there. It also made changes to Frenzy effectively because of this. And those Frenzy changes did kind of reverberate through and kind of made Sleipnir a little worse, but actually made Frenzy in a lot of other places much more usable. And we see that to this day being kind of a staple going for LMGs. And also Catalyst, of course, being tied to the army terminal and one certain world boss. is just from Battle for Brooklyn, and you can't get it outside of there. And this was, of course, a very big one where we got a basically new area to play around with Brooklyn. I was very happy to see, as well as I kind of said in the video for Brooklyn, that we did get and basically 2 zones that were fully fledged, even though it was just 2 zones. And of course, I, like everybody else, would have loved it to be more zones and to be much bigger and to be much more. But at least the 2 zones that they did give us, plus the missions and such on there, none of it felt out of place. None of it felt rushed. None of it felt, Temu version of Division. It was all fully fledged and everything was there and the world was well made. And I was very happy for that because I was very concerned that it would be of lesser quality, and it wasn't in the end. And yeah, that moves us, of course, last season, that was Battle for Brooklyn release, moves us to current season where we have Urban Lookout and Tipping Skills coming in with this season. Soft Spot as our talent, its associated items. And of course, yeah, Overdogs and Shroud came from the reward track here. And actually to this, I need to add that this is also not floor 100, of course, to Tempest. This was also with the Retaliation game mode coming in this season, of course. And then, yeah, Expertise capped at 30, as actually here our Expertise went to 30. With the season before it, it was Expertise 28. But then with Battle for Brooklyn, we basically got enough items for two levels worth of Expertise. So we got to 30, and I'm very happy that they did cap it at 30. As yeah, letting that run away for much longer would have been a little bit detrimental to the game, I feel. Also, capping it at 30 means that as we go forward, we'll be getting more brands and talents and gear to easily get to 30, because as more and more items come in, of course, it's going to be easier and easier to run, just farm up, for instance, brand sets and gear sets extra and just donate those. And making it a lot easier to get to grade 30 and Expertise 30. This is then the Divide and Conquer modifier, and then also the Content Creator event and the Rainbow Six event that we've had so far. And of course, we'll likely see an Halloween event coming in pretty soon, and we'll add that in once it is here. Now, overall, yeah, this guide is a very long one, but yeah, I kind of wanted to go through it like this. And I want to keep making additions to it. Actually, with this video, it ran already into a few places where maybe I should add in a few things here and there, especially I think to Woni. But yeah, it was kind of fun for myself as well, kind of putting this together. Some things had completely left my mind, like Critical Strike Range. Actually, that was like I was like, wait, what? What do you mean? What was this? But yeah, going through and just reminiscing was kind of fun. But this as well, in this video, I was hoping to, as I did here, just go through and just lay it out and just go kind of the history of the game. And maybe make some veterans go like, oh yeah, that was there, wasn't it? And hopefully the changes are better than what we had. And I would say overall, especially looking at having gone back and looked at early footage of Division 2 and going back to the end versions that we have now, or, well, it's not the end, but the current versions that we have now, it is completely a different game. And to conclude this a little bit too long video, but I kind of liked going through and rambling about kind of the feels of the game. As yeah, going through, I very much enjoyed kind of reminiscing about some of these things. And it's very obvious, going back all the way to the start, how much the game has changed and what the systems were at the start and what we have now. Well, the core of the game is very much still there. The gear has completely been changed. What we're using now is completely different than what we were using at the start of the game. And of course, even some of those metrics upon them has changed, as some of the brand bonuses and such, and the reworks on everything. And this has been my attempt as well to kind of make sense of a lot of it, because for myself, yeah, as we talked about several times, it's melted all together. This helps spread it all out, I hope. But yeah, this guide I'm going to try to keep up to date, keep it maintained, and go through and keep adding to it. It's going to be a long-term project. But that's also the call to action here. If you feel anything has been missed, if you feel anything is out out of place as well, as something very likely could be attributed to the wrong place. As I've used several sources, and sometimes some of them even between them kind of, yeah, very much were not in agreement, and I've just made an executive decision to put it somewhere. And yeah, that might have caused a few issues. But yeah, so if you know any mistakes, definitely point those out. But also if you have just any suggestions. But I'll continue working on this. Of course, I'll keep adding to it as seasons go by and also as things get added into the game. But overall, yeah, this is, I feel, a good starting point to have and for a release of it. And I hope you did enjoy coming along with me through all of the years, as yeah, a lot has happened. If you did enjoy this video, please do any and all of the algorithm things down below, as it does help out. So do that little bit of shilling here. And for future videos, we're going to go into that retaliation video that I still want to do, but also actually looking at another toolbox video. And likely this time, I want to make it about movement. Also, we'll likely have a pistol headhunter video coming up, going both over high-end and Hunter's Fury variants of it. As, yeah, I definitely need to make that build showcase, as it's been on the docket for quite a long time, and I've just been always pushing it off, as I'm just not that good of a headhunter. But we'll make do, and we'll make that happen. So yeah, I hope you join me for those. But for now, as always, have a good night.